Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions podcast network. I am your host, Alex Perry. Today's show was recorded on May 17th, 2019, and is a supplemental episode to our regular WeeklyTrek episode for the week. And this is our very fun episode where we're just going to talk about the Deep Space Nine documentary. So joining me back again, Jenn Tifft. Welcome, Jen.
Hi. I can't wait for this.
Yes. So I wanted to do this in a little separate episode because there are folks who haven't, because they're not in the US, maybe they missed the cinematic showing, maybe they weren't a backer, haven't had the chance to see the Deep Space Nine documentary yet. There will be further opportunities if you're in the UK and Ireland, for example. There are cinematic showings now scheduled for June. The home media release will come in August. So wanted this to kind of be a little time capsule that you could kind of go back to once you'd had an opportunity to see it, because the Deep Space Nine documentary was amazing, and I just wanted to take a little time for us to chat about it and how cool it was. Jen, tell me, you saw it.
I did.
Give me your general thoughts and reactions. Did you love it?
I did. I loved it. I thought the tone was perfect. It was just a celebration of, full disclosure, my all-time favorite television show. Deep Space Nine is my absolute favorite. So it feels like it was them, taking a well-deserved victory lap, and I love that feeling of it. I loved it.
That's a really good way of putting it. A well-deserved victory lap. I mean, certainly compared to. There are points in the documentary where they have the cast read actual letters that fans had written during the show, and they are extremely critical of the show, of the characters, of some of the choices that were made during the show. And you kind of do get that sense that Deep Space Nine was in some ways the sort of discovery of its day, that there was a subsection of the fans that were really against it. And now, 25 years later, having that opportunity to go back and to celebrate this show that was so prescient and so ahead of its time in many ways, and kind of foreshadowed what kind of modern television looked like, and just did it so well, was really well deserved. And it kind of cast those fan letters from the time in a totally new way that, you could laugh about it rather than have it be something that, was potentially not a very happy memory.
Yeah. It's kind of cathartic to know that there was nasty people like this, back then too. It's not just, it's just not an internet age problem. It's not just Discovery. And I couldn't imagine them hearing these things, all, trying to put your best work in, and this being the response, these being the letters you get. And they were nasty, and they were the same type of, there were some horrible, racist and misogynistic tones to those letters too. So why are you even Star Trek fans? I don't understand at all, I thought that was interesting the way and you're right. Now you can laugh at it because, guess what? You're irrelevant,
Right. The show outlasted the criticism.
Right. Yeah. Ugh.
It was just really well put together. It was really slick. It was high energy. It was very watchable. It was funny.
High energy.
One of my favorite moments was actually from really early in the doc. So the documentary starts as Max Radenchik singing one of the Star Trek Rat Pack songs, which was "I Left My Heart in San Francisco," but was "I Left My Heart on Deep Space Nine" or something like that.
With Quark and Cisco.
That's right. Yes, I left my heart with Quark and Cisco. I knew it rhymed with "I left my heart in San Francisco."
Right.
Yes, I left my heart with Quark and Cisco. And then they kick into an HD upgraded footage from the battle sequence in Sacrifice of Angels from the sixth season. And then Andy Robinson interrupts and gives this sort of monologue about Deep Space Nine. And it was so fun because he doesn't tell you that this is what he's doing, but it's 100% what he's doing. He's reading the lines as Garak.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
He's like, so he's not wearing the makeup. He's just wearing like a drab suit, but he's delivering these lines, and it's got all of the sort of Garak intonation to it. And that was just, I was just like, oh my God, like for a moment, we got just a little bit more of this character. It was just such a cool thing. And it was, it was one of those things where that's the kind of level of thought and attention that only a group of people making a documentary who really loved the source material would have ever thought to have done anything like that. And who knows whose idea it was. Did Andrew Robinson say, hey, maybe I should do this as Garrick? Or did Ira Stephen Bear say, hey, you know what might be fun is if you did this as Garrick? But it just was like one of those little things that if you were a non-fan and you went and watched the documentary, I mean, why you would do that, who knows? But that's the kind of detail that you wouldn't pick up on. But for a fan, it was one of those things where you were just like, oh my God, he's doing Garrick. I can't believe he's doing Garrick. This is amazing.
I kind of wish that was the first thing we saw.
Yes, the opening of it, the Mac Credenchik song was very Ira. I mean, it was, it was sort of very much his kind of style of weird and subversive and defying your expectations. And as much as I love Max Credenchik, it was an odd choice for how to start the documentary.
Yeah, I agree. I watched the backer stream first, and I thought it was a really corny way to start. But then when I saw it in the theater, it played a lot better.
Yeah,
I think just because I was just so excited at that point to be seeing this on the big screen that I was up for anything, even like as corny as you want to be, like go for it, like. So it played a little better the second time for me. But I totally agree. It was an interesting choice.
Well, and it also sort of set the terms of this is something we're not taking ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, that's true.
They were going to talk about serious things in the documentary, but it was always going to be with a bit of a glint in their eye and with a bit of with the intent of having fun along the way. And so in that respect, it was a good way to open it. Certainly better than, if you'd opened it with a discussion between Ira and Kerry Cluggage, the head of Paramount, about the hair and facial hair choices for Avery Brooks, where he wanted to have the goatee and the shaved head, but they wouldn't let him and Ira had to fight so that Avery could shave his head and grow out the goatee because the network didn't want that. I mean, that was like that guy did not present himself in the best light. Let's put it that way.
No, I mean, did he? Yeah, that part was fascinating to me. I don't know if that guy even realized what he was saying. Like, he literally used the word street.
Yep.
Like, come on, are you serious? Like this, and then it made me. That part was actually really interesting to me because I never. Because of my privilege, I never thought of that. That was. I thought it was just the choice. The choice they made was, he's clean cut, and then they went to a different look, and it never dawned on me, for whatever reason, that was what it was, and it took them 3 seasons to convince these executives to not be racist. You know what I mean? Like, really, as I found that really interesting and really sad, and that part was weird. I mean, that interview with the executive was a weird part. But yeah, and then when he went full hawk, that's when that's when the show really started getting good too.
That's when they started cooking with gas.
Yeah.
And you could kind of tell that from Avery's performance too, that his performance as the character became much bolder starting with season 4, and I think it did have a lot to do with how he felt comfortable with himself as a person.
Right. Why that was even an issue is just mind blowing to me. That made me feel like, okay, well, here's some privilege I had that I never thought of. So that was actually one of the more serious parts of the documentary that I found really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I guess kind of begs a good question, which is, what did you learn that was new about Deep Space Nine after having watched this?
Yeah, it's that was definitely something for me. That maybe this just might be my oblivious nature, but I wasn't aware of that. I thought it was just a decision they made. I didn't realize that he wanted the other look and more comfortable, and they said no. But yeah, but otherwise, I didn't really learn too much new. But that's kind of what happens when you watch a documentary, that's on a subject that a lot about, that you're more familiar with. You know what I mean? It's more like you're waiting for them to tell the stories that you know what I mean, that you want to hear. when it's something you're familiar with, like Deep Space Nine, which was fine. If I wanted like a real academic analysis of the show, I'd want like a book anyway, as opposed to like a documentary. Like I'd rather have this was perfect the way they did it. But other something else I learned about. Oh, well, little things. Like it was interesting that the story about Quark and Rom wearing the wrong heads.
Oh yeah.
Isn't true.
Uh-huh.
Because that's a story I've always heard, and I assumed it was true. So I think that was funny the way they did that. Like having the guy tell the story that we know, and
yes,
and be like, "Yeah, I don't remember that happening. I don't think that happened at all." So that was fun.
Yeah, I think for me there were two things. One, the fact that this was quite a painful experience for some of the actors involved. I mean, you thinking about like the makeup that they had to wear. I mean, that can't be a particularly pleasant experience to work under all that makeup for that many hours a day. But listening to Renee reflect on what that was like, and that one of the primary words he used when he thinks back on that experience is painful, really goes to show the extent to which these actors were really passionate about their craft and did put up with a lot. And the fact that they went through all of this but still gave us these amazing performances in which you had to show all kinds of emotions when you're probably hot and grumpy and tired and uncomfortable and potentially even in pain because you're in all this makeup, just shows how much of a challenge it was to make something ultimately that good. I think the second area is that I was pleasantly surprised by how reflective and self-critical, particularly Ira Stephen Bear was about Deep Space Nine. They do this section where they're talking about the political issues that Deep Space Nine dealt with. And then there is this aside looking at the question of, was sexual identity something that Deep Space Nine handled in a good way? And they kind of present you the argument that, yes, they did, Rejoined, which is an episode which does get a lot of credit for exploring LGBT issues. But it's Ira who kind of pulls that back and says, yes, but that was the only episode we did in 7 seasons. We didn't have a gay character. Right. And it's not that, they tried, but they couldn't get one. It's just that they didn't even try. And it wasn't something they thought about asking to do or exploring, even though potentially you did have a good character who could have served that role because of the way that Andy Robinson played the character of Garak, right, and his relationship with Bashir. There were lots of ingredients there that you could have turned into a really interesting story about having Garak potentially be a gay character. And Ira talks about, one of the interesting things would have been if after the events of the episode The Wire, Garak had come out to Bashir, and what that relationship would have looked like over the remainder of the show could have been really interesting, but just wasn't something that they explored. So I liked hearing that. I mean, you oftentimes when creative types who spend a lot of their time and a lot of effort invested in developing something like this look back on it, they tend to do it very defensively and not potentially with that kind of level of self-criticism about, yes, we did lots of things right, but there were some areas that we could have done differently. So that was really nice, and I thought was a really nice way of reflecting on the legacy of the show in both the good and the bad parts.
Right, because they went through the checklist. They did a good job in a lot of areas, and that's one that they could have definitely explored more. But who knows, too, based on that, the interview with that executive, how much they would have, even if they did ask, how much they would have let them do.
Right.
Which is interesting. But yeah, there weren't too many negative parts in the documentary, but I thought that was a good one for them to stand back and say we could have done better on. And they talk, like we already mentioned the one with Sisko's hair, with Avery Brooks's hair, and then there was the part with Terry Farrell.
Yeah, right.
Talking about her experience, which it was interesting what they chose to focus on with that, I guess.
I liked the way that they felt that they chose to focus on her expressing her thoughts and feelings about it rather than having somebody else kind of explain what they thought had happened.
Right, because you only ever hear one side of this sort of thing, usually. But I guess I still don't know the entire actual story, or if anyone actually does, or but it was just, it's something weird that happens, and I'm glad that they addressed it without making her the bad guy. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Hmm.
Because this one's hard to talk about because I don't know the whole story, but I do know that watching this documentary and having Terry Farrell still feel so strongly about it that she's in tears talking about something that happened 20 years ago is, you know what I mean? Like, it's significant, something significant. And it makes me really sad that literally my favorite character in Star Trek, the reason that she left the show was something that was painful for her. So it was interesting.
Yeah, because I've heard/read Terry, when she came back to Star Trek Las Vegas for the first time in a number of years, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, she kind of told her side of the story in much more detail than even the documentary went into. But that's a side of the story that stands at stark contrast with like Rick Berman's side of the story, which if you read the 50 Years of Star Trek by Mark Altman books, he kind of talks about what his perspective on it was. And both of these people like clearly feel like they're telling their truth. Just those truths are totally opposite. You don't get the sense that Rick Berman is necessarily lying about what happened, or that Terry Farrell is lying about what happened. They both believe that this was the course of events as they understood it. And I think that's why Michael Dorn makes this really good point, which is that the only people who really knew what happened were the people who were in the room, and everybody else is just going off of what they were told. So it's a real tough one for them to grapple with because there's no real way of knowing what the truth is. But I think really nice that they focused on the actress's perspective rather than on the studio's perspective, because the studio is always going to try and paint themselves in the best light and kind of crush the perspective of, especially because, Terry being a woman, to kind of crush that and kind of sell their side of the story. So yeah, it was, and that's the thing with these documentaries is you could probably do a whole documentary just about Terry Farrell's exit from Deep Space Nine. Yeah. It's only ever going to be able to dive into surface details about any of this stuff. And so it's interesting to see which surface details they choose to go into and how they choose to portray that. All right, let's move from sad stuff to happy stuff.
Yes.
High definition footage of Deep Space Nine, not just high definition, but also widescreen presentation of some of the footage from these episodes, because I guess they found that by season 3 of Deep Space Nine, the way that the show was being shot, it was being shot widescreen proof, so that if you were to do it in widescreen, you wouldn't see light stands and sandbags in the widescreen shot. Even though it was still shot for 4:3 presentation. But part of the reason why the documentary came out in the 26th anniversary year of Deep Space Nine rather than the 25th is because the team went back and remastered all of the footage, all of the clips that they planned to include in the documentary into high definition. So Jen, wasn't that spectacularly gorgeous seeing Deep Space Nine in high definition?
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, I'm really glad they took the time to do it all. I mean, it's incredible. Geez, the Sacrifice of Angels battle,
gorgeous.
It was glorious, all those ships and all those details, it's true, the true meaning of the phrase, ship porn.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
But everything, I really loved the bonus feature at the end, the discussion about how the technical details. I couldn't get enough of the technical details of the HD work that they put into making that. There's a lot of things that I didn't realize about the process. And, I didn't realize that they had to piece, if they did it, they'd have to piece all the episodes together from raw footage.
Yep.
And which is something that now I see why this would be, one of the reasons to be a big deal. And it was neat to see, they had Jonathan West doing the color corrections with them. And that was just fascinating to me. And I see why it took so long. And I was glad that they did take that long to do it all, because it looked incredible.
Yeah, that's why when folks talk about, what a stupendous undertaking Next Generation was doing in high definition, effectively what you're doing is they have all the rolls of footage in a salt mine, I think somewhere actually in Pennsylvania. Yeah, where they keep all of this stuff climate controlled, and you basically have to get every box of footage. And effectively what you're doing is you're redoing post-production on the episode all over again. You're taking that original footage, you're cutting it all back together in exactly the same order that it was in the episode, using exactly the same set of shots. And sometimes those shots are not, it's not like everything is cataloged next to each other or all in the same box. A lot of times this footage is spread over multiple different boxes, because it might be that this footage was filmed on a particular day, this footage was filmed on another day, this footage needed to have visual effects, and so it ended up in another box entirely. It's a real labor to kind of find all of the footage that you want, even for 15 minutes worth of clips, let alone before you get to making a whole episode. So the amount of effort it took just for them to get these 15 minutes in there is a really amazing undertaking. And they went to the trouble of redoing some of the effects for the documentary. So the Sacrifice of Angels clip has actually been around for a little while on YouTube. One of the original VFX artists a couple of years ago, because he still had some of those original assets, including the Sacrifice of Angels sequences, kind of redid them in high definition as like this is what you could do, and which set off a lot of people thinking about how amazing Deep Space Nine would be in high definition, but also what a challenge it would be, since so much of it is CG, and we don't necessarily know that all of those original assets even still exist, because it wasn't the kind of thing that at the time they kept really good track of. Like, all of the Insurrection digital effects are 100% gone, because they were all made in a software that was created by a company that doesn't exist anymore. So nobody has the software to open the files to be able to do anything with them, which is part of the reason why the Eagle Moss collection doesn't have sonar ships in it, because the original digital assets don't exist anymore. But for this documentary, they definitely did. There were phaser shots in the Siege of AR-558 scenes. The destruction of the Odyssey, that was wholly high definition. There's clearly a new digital explosion placed there when the Odyssey is destroyed. They really went to a lot of effort. There are a couple of little sequences where they either upscaled the specific effect shots. So like, you'll have HD, then someone fires a phaser, and that little fire phaser bit will be looks kind of blurrier than the kind of very crisp high definition. In those cases, it's because that particular like phaser shot was in a box, and they couldn't find it, or it wasn't in the assets that CBS had given them. But where they could, it's clear they went to a lot of effort to, just make this footage look really good. And if this is the only place we're ever going to get Deep Space Nine in high definition, then amazing, right? I mean, so great that we got that.
Yeah, but now I want it.
Oh yeah.
I want it so bad.
Now it's been proved what can be done.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, here's hoping, right? Here's hoping that by packing out theaters across the country for this documentary, it did send a signal to CBS that this is something we're interested in getting, and that there is an audience and a market for. The most we can do is try. So UK and Irish fans, get yourself to a cinematic screening. Make sure you've got your Blu-rays on pre-order. Continue sending as many signals as we can to the powers that be. This is something that we want and are willing to pay for. It's the only way at this point.
So yeah, I just can't imagine how much that would cost to do. I don't know do we know how much it costs them to do the Next Generation?
Yeah, I think it was like $25 million.
25, yeah, all right. I'm not gonna hold my breath.
Not an insignificant investment.
Yeah, but it looks so good. It's beautiful.
It looks so good. And I mean, this is about future-proofing, really. Yeah. I mean, my theory on it has always been, if Jeff Bezos is willing to pay for the Picard show, and the guy's got more money than God, $25 million, nothing, and he loves these shows. So, just cut CBS a check and tell them to go wild with it. And why not do another $25 million so we can get Voyager as well, and just call it a day.
Seriously.
Yeah. But so if there are any billionaires that listen to WeeklyTrek, I would highly encourage you to invest some of your money in having CBS upgrade Deep Space Nine and Voyager for high definition. So the last thing I wanted to get your reaction to was this season 8, episode 1 story that we got. A very cool idea. Ira brought together some of the original writers, Ron Moore, Renee Echeverria, Hans Beimler, Robert Hewitt-Wolf, to sit down and kind of bash out a story for a fictional first episode of the 8th season of Deep Space Nine. And I certainly want to know what happens in the second episode. But Jen, how did you feel about it?
Oh, this was my absolute favorite part of the documentary, was the season 8 stuff. it's interesting enough to see behind the scenes in the writer's room. To like watching them kind of like bounce things off each other was really interesting. But that story they came up with, man. And the animations were really cool to see.
Such a cool way of doing it.
It was. It really was. Do you feel we got to revisit these characters? You know, I loved Kara as a Vedic.
Yep.
That's perfect. I loved the Next Generation Molly and Joseph Sisko. Perfect. That.
Yep.
But in my mind, Cassie Yates had a girl. But
I agree. And in the books, it's a girl.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, Rebecca.
Oh, Rebecca. Okay. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna cry. I want the adventures of Esri and Julian on the Emmett Till.
Yes, especially since we know that Bashir has a big secret.
Yeah. Section 31, in there. Oh, yeah, they put everything into that into that season 8 episode. It was great. That was by far my favorite part.
And at the end of the episode, we have the return of Captain Sisko, the promised return from the end of What You Leave Behind, finally made true. And even if we don't get any more story, it did give you a feeling of closure on that one dangling kind of story thread from the end of Deep Space Nine, which was, is Sisko going to return and when?
Right.
Now we, quote unquote, know. Because it came from the minds of the people who developed this. Whether it's something that ever makes it into the Star Trek canon, who knows? And in some ways, who cares, right?
Right. Oh yeah.
It'd be great if it does.
Speculate.
Exactly. It's just a really nice kind of opportunity to, just in the same way as Andy Robinson reading the lines as Garak, to kind of spend a bit more time hearing new ideas and new stuff about these characters from the people who originally created it. Just so fun and such a great idea for a through line for the documentary.
Yeah, that was the best part.
And they shot all day, so there's plenty of footage, which makes me think that hopefully in the special features there'll be a lot more of that session.
I hope so. I'd love to just listen to them bouncing ideas off each other. I could watch that all day.
Yeah, because they all had great chemistry. I mean, it was clear that they all enjoyed being with each other, and that this was kind of a family reunion for them in some ways.
Right, and the way they wrote the characters, where they would be 20 years later, it was still really true.
Felt so true to all of them.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, amazing.
And then and then. Even just like I liked Garak and Worf meeting in secret, and it had everything. It was so good.
Yeah, it did have everything except Odo. That was the one piece they decided to hold back for a later episode. Which is still cool. I mean, it's nice that they were even thinking that way, right? That they were, they kind of put themselves in the mindset for a day of what would this be like if we were really making a season of television about this.
And I'd like to think too that it would be revealed that like Nog faked his own death, or, Section 31 faked it, or I don't know. Or they were trying to get Nog is working to to dismantle Section 31 or whatever. So they were. He's undercover. Oh, there's a good Section 31.
Oh, that'd be an interesting
Section
idea.
31. Yeah, and Nog works for the good Section 31. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting into the speculation too. But that's what was great about it.
And just like we are talking about Deep Space Nine in high definition, I mean, we've got 2 animated television Star Trek shows. Why not add a Deep Space Nine show and continue the story?
Right. Or even just short treks. Give me short treks that are, all that's a way to do it. If you, realistically, they're not going to bring Deep Space Nine back for season 8. They're not going to bring Voyager back. Whatever. Like obviously that's fine. But that would be a way to do it. Like something like this, you get to, have a short trek about these characters that we all loved. Where are they now? All these actors that we love, even just hearing their voices be these characters would be great. I think they could do a whole series of just those little vignettes,
So many possibilities.
So many.
And it seems like the kind of possibilities they're interested in exploring.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Well, that's, in just that episode, there were actual substance to it too. It wasn't just like, where are they now?
Right.
There was this whole plot about the Bajoran religion and the Jem'Hadar, converting, like that's fascinating. And there's a lot of implications to that.
Mm-hmm.
And now Section 31's in the business of trying to eradicate basically the Bajoran culture. If they're trying to eradicate their religion, that's their entire culture. And there's so many fascinating implications to all that. It wasn't just a where are they now kind of fun thing. There's actual meat to it too.
Right.
I love that.
Amazing. It just creates so many possibilities and ideas. And that's what Deep Space Nine does, right? That's what it did as the show, and the documentary even found a way to kind of continue carrying that torch into the future, which is so fun and such a good project. And if you've listened to us talk about this now and you still haven't seen it, what are you waiting for? Well, you're probably waiting for the DVD or the Blu-ray at this point. But if you haven't seen it, please find an opportunity to do so. If you are in any way, shape, or form a Deep Space Nine fan, you will not be disappointed. Well, we will have to do another one of these once the Blu-ray comes out and we've got the special features and we get the opportunity to watch it. So at STLV, I mentioned in the regular WeeklyTrek episode, I am in a total blink and you miss me in the documentary. And one of the final shots of the documentary, they went to STLV 3 years ago and they set up a camera and a screen, and basically fans could come in and sit down in front of the camera and just talk about whatever they wanted to about Deep Space Nine. So there's this whole set of fan testimonials, and you see a bunch of them throughout the documentary, of little snippets of people talking about it. And then in one of the final shots, they basically got this like wall of faces, kind of little testimonials, like just tiny, no audio, but just pictures of people who gave the testimonials, and I'm one of them. I'm hoping that more of those testimonials make it into special features, because I gave one and I happened to be in the room for some people talking about it, and there were just some really fascinating stories and insights into the shows that came out from just fans having the opportunity to sit down and riff on whatever they wanted to about Deep Space Nine, and that might be fun. I think that would be fun to watch in the features. I have no interest in watching myself, but I would be really interested in watching
I would
and hear what they have to say about it.
I would be interested in hearing that. So it was nice in the documentary that hearing from the different fans who appreciate the show, the same way we do, and it was great. Well, I hope to see you in the special features then.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
but that we didn't talk about the credit.
Oh, that was such a fun thing too.
What a good way to do that, because there was, there's literally, we can rattle off all these topics that we could have covered, if this documentary was, 5 hours long.
And that's very true. As we were talking about, you have to pick the things that you've only got an hour and a half. You can talk for 10 hours. Everything's going to get short shrift.
And I'm hoping in the special features, because some of the topics they mentioned, they said they filmed a piece on.
Yeah.
They just didn't, they said what was trials and tribulations, and probably In the Pale Moonlight, I think they said they filmed one about. But those would be great special features.
Totally.
So I'm hoping for
those of us who want hours 3, 4, and 5.
Exactly. Yeah. I would watch it all day. Not gonna lie. But I thought that was a really interesting way to do the credits. That was fun.
Well, Jen, this was fun. Thank you. I'm glad we got the opportunity to chat about this. I hope folks have enjoyed listening to our thoughts on the Deep Space Nine documentary. And as I say, if you haven't seen it, find an opportunity to do so. You won't be disappointed.
It's filled with joy.
Well, this has been an extra special bumper double feature for WeeklyTrek this week. We will return to regular programming next week unless somebody wants to greenlight a Voyager documentary and have it do a cinematic release next week. Well, they should. I think somebody should do a Voyager documentary.
Absolutely.
It's time. There's also a lot of interesting stories for Voyager to dive into as well. So Ira, now you're done with Deep Space Nine, turn to Voyager. No, I'm just kidding. Brana Braga, what are you doing? You're making the Orville. Make some time for a Voyager documentary.
Plenty of time for that on the side, right?
Exactly. Well, that's definitely all the time we've got for WeeklyTrek this week. Thank you so much, Jen, again, for spending so much time with me today talking about Star Trek Picard and about the Deep Space Nine documentary. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.